Okay. Today is Friday, March 7th, 2014, and we are in Bellingham, Massachusetts. This tape is part of the Bellingham-Mendon Veterans Oral History Project. My name is Marjorie Hollman, and our cameraman is Eric Fisher of ABMI Cable 8 TV. We are privileged to have with us today Cadet DeTore of Bellingham, Massachusetts. Kay, would you please tell us your full name and birth date?
My full name is Catherine Jane DeTore. My birth date was January 4th, 1924.
And when you were, what organization did you serve with that we were talking about?
The U.S. Cadet Nurse Corps.
All right. Oh, there you are signing in. How many people did you say was in that group?
It was 700 of us
Wow.
took the oath on
All
Boston Common.
May 14th, 1944.
Yep.
Okay. Now tell us the war that was going on when you undertook this training.
This was during World War II.
All right. And your title was?
We were student nurses. We filled in the hospitals when the nurses went to war. We were there to learn and fill in.
For the nurses that went off to war.
Right.
Okay. And did you have a name that they called you, like a nurse? A nurse cadet, was it, or something?
We were cadets, yes.
Okay. All right. And tell us about any other family members you had that served in the military, Kay.
Well, I had no brothers, but my father had served in World War I, and my uncle served in World War I. And that was it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And tell us about why you joined the Nurse Corps.
Well, it started, I went in training at the Milford Hospital, and while I was there, I had a point where I wasn't studying too well because the Coconut Grove fire had happened, and one of my father's bosses and his wife were at the Coconut Grove the night of the fire, and they were killed. And I was kind of depressed over that, so I really didn't study that well, and so I just didn't make the first time, and they told me to come back the second time. And the second time, I think it was part of their fault and my fault. I felt that I was being used because the students all came to me about, do you do this, instead of going to the instructors. And they finally decided that I wouldn't make a nurse. So I left there and went to the Draper Corporation and went on got a job on the gun job. They called it the gun job. We were making 75 millimeter guns for World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was working there, my aunt got very ill in Somerville and was in the Somerville Hospital. While she was there, I had time off, and I went in and helped take care of her and talked to the nurses while I was there, and they suggested, well, why didn't I come in there? And I went home and thought about it and decided I was going to try it again. So I went to the director of nurses, and she gave me 2 dates. I could go in February or September. And I decided if I was going to do it, I'd do it in February. So I went in February and joined the U.S. Cadet Nurse Corps and had no problems.
Wonderful. Well, tell us about your duties and training, Kay.
Well, when we first started, we had to go to classes, and the classes were conducted in Boston. So we had to take the bus and the L and go to Copley Square, and we met with a very large group of cadet nurses, as you saw, being sworn in, and we all had the same classes, and then we do that 3 or 4 days a week for the first 6 months. And then you were capped. If you passed all your classes, you had a cap.
And that's a picture of
That's
you
your
in your
cap.
training uniform, right?
Yeah, that's a training uniform, and the white cap showed your first year student. Second year students, you got a blue narrow band to put on your hat. And your third year students, you got a black band to put on your hat.
Okay. And what were some of the things that you helped with when you were through your training? You talked something about maternity and surgical. So what were some of the experiences you had?
Oh yes, you had surgery, you have obstetrics, you have psychiatric, you had all of these, and because Somerville was not a very large hospital, I had to affiliate with Boston City Hospital, where I spent 9 months doing pediatrics. We did pediatrics, we did some nursing, we did orthopedics, and what else? We did some surgery over there too, and I did my dietary over there.
Now, my understanding was that you were replacing or helping to replace nurses that were sent overseas because of the war. Did you have any experiences helping with military wounded who came back because of the war?
Yes, we had, in Boston City Hospital, they had a ward, and there were paraplegics who came back from the war, and there was amputees in another ward that came back. And we were trained to care for both of them. And the amputees were the hardest ones to take care of because they kept insisting they were going to do things too fast. And they were forever falling and were forever picking them up and telling them, you know, you have to go slowly because they had lost one leg and they just couldn't get used to the crutches. They wanted to go without them.
Because they were so young? Was that because they were so young?
Yes, they were so young and so ambitious that they were going to get back.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about the housing that you had as a nurse cadet and some of the rules that you agreed to abide by.
Oh, our housing was in Somerville. We didn't have a dormitory. We had big old houses. And when I first got there, I had 3 roommates. And there was 3 of us in a room, and we had...
There are some of your fellow nurses there.
Yeah.
There's a picture of you with your fellow nurses. You were Catherine Mabey at the time.
Yes.
Down in the bottom center.
Right.
Okay.
And, oh, where was I? Okay. The director of nurses lived in the home with us. But we had curfew. You had to be in your room at 10 o'clock, lights out at 10:30, no baths after 9:45. You had 1 overnight a month, 1 12 o'clock late, and 1 11:30 was all that you could stay out. You had to be in the dormitory, and there was checks. And then when we went to Boston City, we lived in a dormitory. And the rules were approximately the same. And then we went to Boston State to have our psychiatric, and that was 3 months.
And how much did you get paid?
Oh, we started, I think, at $7 and worked up to $21 a month.
Okay. The government was paying for your nursing training, correct?
Right.
Okay. But otherwise, you were getting $7 a month.
In the beginning, yes.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh my. Yep. Now tell us about what kind of a uniform was that?
That's the Cadet Nurse Corps uniform. They gave us winter uniforms and summer uniforms. And We were supposed to wear them.
You didn't wear them when you were working,
No,
obviously.
no, but while you were off duty and left the premises, you were supposed to be in uniform.
You were always in uniform? Okay.
Most of the time, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, tell us about what you did for entertainment.
Oh.
And
Well,
that you can tell us. That's right.
If we had an early afternoon, we might be able to make a movie, but usually we went out to eat if we had enough money left for the month. There wasn't an awful lot of it. We did a lot of walking, but in Somerville, stores weren't too close to us, so we had to walk quite a ways. And you didn't do a lot of shopping, not on that small pay.
Right. Was the MBTA, did that reach to Somerville when you were there?
The buses did, yes. And the school provided us with tickets while we were going to classes. But if we wanted to go into Boston, we had to pay our own way.
Okay. All right. Well, tell us how you felt about World War II.
Oh, that's a hard one.
Well, you talked about Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, I remember Pearl Harbor. It was a Sunday night, and we were having dinner, and it came over the radio that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and I knew a few people that were over there, and one of them was killed in that bombing. But then after that, boys, even from I was a senior in high school then, and some of our classmates signed up right away. Right after that, they signed right up. And most of them were volunteers, signing up in the Army, the Air Force, the Navy.
So there was a draft that went on as well?
Not till later. It seems to me that I can remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, well, how did it feel seeing these men that you knew go off to war?
Well, it was kind of sad to see them go because you didn't know what was happening over there. But they all wanted to go because of what the Japanese had done to us in Pearl Harbor. And we felt bad. I wanted to do more.
Now, what did you know about what was going on in the war in Europe? How aware were you of what was going on in the death camps? What did you know about that?
We didn't know anything about that until later. I was in training, I think, when that came all out at the death camps, and that was just horrible. To, think that people had been treated like that.
Okay. Well, tell us about how war changed your activities of daily life, Kay.
Well, I think you looked at everything carefully before you did anything. The food changed. You were rationed on gas. You were rationed on food. There were only certain things that you could buy. And these all meant a lot. They meant a lot to a lot of people.
Well, how did that play out in your home with your family, and then when you were at school? How did rationing work? Some of us have never lived with that. We don't know how that would have worked, how the system worked.
No, all my rationing things went to the school for the food to feed me. And of course they had their own rationing at home. And they didn't come to visit too often because of the gas. And I only had one overnight a month. And so that meant it was too far to go home and come back in the same day.
And was there an office that you went to get your ration stamps, or did they get delivered to you? How did they get distributed, or how did that work?
The ration stamps were distributed. I think they went right to the School of Nursing for me. And at home, they would go right to the house. You had to go and get them.
On a monthly basis, on a weekly?
No, you got a book that had stamps in it, and they tore the stamps out as you bought the different things.
Okay. And you mentioned something about even sugar and margarine getting rationed. What do you remember about that?
Oh, yes, and I remember the margarine that you had to take the bags, and there was a pellet in it, and you had to break the pellet and squeeze it to make it orange or yellow, make it palatable, you know, so you could eat it.
What did it look like without the pellet to color
White.
it?
It's just like a white, almost like a lard.
Oh.
Ooh.
Okay. Talk to us about changes that you saw in medical treatment because of the war experiences, and what you saw as a nurse, what you were learning.
Oh, when the doctors started coming back from the war, the first thing I remember is them coming in and saying, "Get that patient out of bed today." And that meant the day after delivery, the day after surgery, and up until that time, patients in obstetrics were kept in bed for 7 days before they were allowed to get out of bed. And surgical patients were kept in bed a lot longer too. And we used to think they were crazy to get them up and moving, and then found out how much better patients recovered. They didn't lose everything by staying in bed. And they moved much faster.
Do you know how the doctors learned this?
I didn't.
How did the doctors learn this to make these changes?
Evidently, while they were at war over in Europe, the patients had, you know, the boys that were wounded had to get up and move because so many were coming in all the time. And just by moving them, they found that they didn't form blood clots.
Okay.
By keeping the circulation going and getting them walking and back on their feet.
So by necessity, they did this and discovered that it was actually a benefit.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, talk to us about when you did get to the movies. You talked about watching newsreels at the movies. What were these newsreels about?
These newsreels all contained Europe and what was going on in Europe and what was going on in the Pacific, and not an awful lot of local news. It was all about the war. And it was about the only way sometimes we caught up with everything, because we didn't get newspapers, and if we did, we really didn't have time to read them.
Why didn't you have time to read them?
Because we were so busy working.
How many hours would you work in a day or in a week?
Well, you worked at least 8 hours a day. If you were on the night shift, 11 to 7, you had to be in bed at 9 o'clock, and you weren't supposed to be up before 4. And then you had your meals. And if you had classes, you didn't get to bed at 9 o'clock. You'd be falling asleep in class. Whatever time you could get to bed and sleep. And other times you worked 3 to 11 or 7 to 3. And sometimes it was an extra shift you had to do. As you got up to be closer to a senior, you had to fill in more for the nurses because you had all the education behind you.
5 days a week, 6?
5 days a week.
Okay. And talk to us about marriage and nursing training,
Oh, you
what
weren't
the
allowed.
rules were.
Yeah, you weren't allowed to get married as a student. This was an automatic out because they felt that you couldn't concentrate on what you were doing. If a married student had gotten in prior and been married prior to coming in as a student and they had accepted her, that was acceptable. Her husband could have been overseas or something, but you could not get married as a student. And there was a lot of rules as students.
Tell us some more of the rules.
Well, like I have said before, you had to be up for roll call at 10 minutes to 7 and over at the hospital. You had to be there for your meals. You had to be in your room by 10 o'clock. No baths after 9:45. You had to be there for meals. Certain hours for sick call. And the main bulletin to find everything out was in the nurse's dining room. What else? Oh, certain days that you sent your laundry. And if you weren't going to be there for a few days because when you moved out to go on affiliation at another hospital, you had to make sure there was nothing on your bed but the mattress. In other words, your bed wasn't made up. Then they wouldn't get mixed up on bed check.
Were there room inspections?
Big pardon?
Did you have room inspections?
Room?
That they would check to see that
Oh,
you
yes, yeah. We had room inspections.
And what were the expectations when they inspected you?
Well, when they inspected the rooms, you had to have everything had to be neat and clean, and your clothes put away and nothing thrown around, and everything hanging in the closet. Oh, yes, they were very particular about the rules and regulations.
Now, I think I hadn't realized, I thought you were the first class that had started the Nurse Cadet Corps, but you were saying something else about when it got started and that...
No, I think there was a class in 1943 after President Roosevelt signed the Cadet Nurse Corps. I think that could have been the first class. I'm not sure. It was so long ago.
It's okay. That's all right. But it was an initiative that President Roosevelt put into effect because of the war?
Because of the war, yes. And the nurses all leaving. And this helped staff the hospitals.
Okay. Well, tell us about how you used your training once the war was over and you had graduated.
Then you had to assign papers when you joined the Cadet Nurse Corps that you would do essential nursing for the duration of World War II. And that meant not going into industrial factories to work or going to private duty or anything like that. In other words, you'd go into hospitals or clinics and work. So I know I went to Framingham Community Hospital and worked there in surgery and obstetrics for a while I studied for my state boards. And then about 6 months later, I passed my state boards, and I went and applied to Milford Hospital for a job. And at that point, I married, so my name was changed. So I applied there, and I got a job there.
But you had to wait to get married till you were finished? with your training?
Yeah, I finished my training and then I was married.
Okay. Would you have gotten married sooner if they didn't have that rule?
No. No, he was still in the service.
Okay. Okay.
And he was down in Texas at the time. He'd just come back from overseas.
Mm-hmm. How did you meet your husband if he was a serviceman?
How did I meet him? My sister married his brother. And I met him at their wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in 1945.
Okay.
And then he had just come back from Europe then, and they had taken him down to Texas. And then from Texas, he was discharged home a year later.
Mm-hmm.
And then a year after that, we were married.
Well, as a nurse, what did you do as a nurse over the years? What were your experiences?
Oh, let me see. I worked in nursing homes. I was director of nurses of one for 8 years. I did private duty. I worked at Milford Hospital. My last job was working at Rentham State School with the mentally retarded. And I retired from there in 1983 to take care of my husband, who was very ill, and kept him at home. And he lived for 7 years. And it was 7 years' time that we had never had time to spend together. But it was very enjoyable the last 7 years. Although he was ill, we had a good time.
It sounds like you put a lot of your nursing skills into effect caring for him.
I did. I told him I never worked so hard. No, because he had so much wrong with him, and he was on oxygen, and at times he was on a respirator, and he had kidney failure. He had a lot wrong.
Mm-hmm. But you were still able to use those skills.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you have any regrets of having spent that time in the Nurse Corps?
No, I was very happy that I had decided to go back into nursing, because I loved it. And I loved taking care of people and listening to them and trying to help them with whatever they have wrong, anything that I could do. And today I feel the same. Except right now I've been away from it so long, I have no idea on the medications and things.
Mm-hmm.
But basic things, you never forget.
Well, talk to us about medications back when you started as a nurse. I know they've changed. Tell us about how things were and then how they've changed.
Oh, things weren't, people were having a real hard time. Prior to penicillin, and penicillin came in around what time of World War II, and penicillin was a miracle drug, and it helped so many people. Other drugs were the same old, some of them we're still using. And those are ones that go for the basic different things. But as far as antibiotics and things, there's so many of them out there now, and it's so good that they help so many people.
How did you treat infections prior to the advent of penicillin?
Prior to penicillin, well, you kept them clean, you kept washing them and putting anything that you had that, you could dry them up and dry up the sores and things. But it was hard because the infections just sometimes went rampant and you couldn't stop them.
Mm-hmm. How did that feel when you felt like you didn't have anything else you could do?
Very exasperated that you couldn't do more.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had tried everything that you could possibly think of to try to stop it.
Well, I don't know, help us understand how penicillin was first introduced with the advent of the war.
I can't remember exactly how it was.
How could you administer it? How was it administered?
Oh, it was administered IM or by pill
What is IM?
into the muscle. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Was
Nurse talk.
into the muscle, and or by pill. And it was around the same time that polio was coming out, and Dr. Sachs that invented the polio vaccine, because patients were coming from different places. I remember while I was in Boston City, we had a couple who were on their honeymoon down in the islands, down the Caribbean, I think, came back, and they both had polio, and she wound up in an iron lung for a while. And he came back, he had polio, but it had just affected the muscles in his legs. He wasn't as bad as she was. But I know she was in the iron lung for a while, and then I had to leave Boston City, so I never found out how she ever made out.
So you worked with taking care of patients who were in iron lungs?
We were trained to take care of patients in iron lungs. At the time I was there, we didn't have one until she came in.
And how, I don't understand what you would have to do to make an iron lung work and how you would care for someone who was inside of them.
Well, it was very hard to take care of them because all you could see coming out of the iron lung was their head, and they had mirrors, and they could talk to us, and they could see everything that was going on behind them. And then when you took them out of the iron lung to bathe them, or so they could use the facilities or something, you had a very short time that you could keep them out because they couldn't breathe that well. So then you had to put them right back into the lung again to get them going. That was before the artificial lung came along and the respirators.
Wow, that sounds very physically taxing for the nursing staff as well.
Yes, it was very quick. Yeah.
Is there anything else to say that you wanted to talk about that I forgot to ask you, Kay?
Not that I can think of, but I think it's a wonderful profession for any young girl to go into that's interested in helping with people. But she has to be interested in caring.
Now, were there any men who were nurses when you were?
No.
Do you remember when that became more common for men to also go into nursing?
No, I don't remember just when that happened, but I was very good. I think it's a wonderful profession for men too.
Okay. If there's nothing else that you want to share, we're going to wrap up. If there's anything else you wanted to talk to us about being a nurse cadet, about your own experiences, memories that this has stirred up, we would love to hear them.
No, you made a lot of good people, and you made a lot of good friends. I know I have a classmate that until she passed away 2 years ago, we were still very friendly. I lost track of her for 18 years, and then received a call on my answering machine, please call this number, and it was a Florida number. And I finally called it, and it was her. And as I said, I hadn't heard from her in 18 years. So then I started going to Florida every winter for a couple of weeks to stay with her. And we built up our friendship again.
This was one of your nurse cadet
Yes,
trainees?
one of the cadets. And then I have others that I was friendly with, but not as close as I was with Terry. Yeah, and we see each other every once in a while. or somebody will call. They come up from Florida and they're staying up here, they'll call.
And any regrets about having gone into nursing?
None at all. Very happy that I went back.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this veterans program. I'm just so grateful for the time you've given us as representing. We know that you're not considered a veteran, but considered home front only because it sounds like a real technicality. But I am very clear of how much you gave back to us, and this was really obvious in this interview. So thanks so much, and thank you to ABMI for their support of this project, and as well as the Bellingham Cultural Council, who has provided support for this project. We will be sending copies of all of these interviews to the Library of Congress to become part of the permanent record there. And any veteran who has ties to Bellingham or Mendon, or people who served in the home front on World War I, World War II, or World War I is probably too late, World War II, and anything else that is serving in the home front is encouraged to contact us to arrange to be interviewed here at ABMI Cable 8. Please call Cable 8 at 508-966-3234 or email me, Marjorie Turner Hollman, marjorie@marjorieturner.com. The phone number for the station and my email will be in the credits at the end of the program. Each person's story is unique. We'd love to hear it.